This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Transporter, the solution to your cloud storage needs. Get 10% off your transporter by visiting filetransporter.com/MV and use the coupon code MacVoices. Welcome to Mac Notables on MacVoices. This is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. I'm Chuck Joyner, and we have Adam Engst back. And wow, Adam, we're not even in front of a user group this time. It's just the two of us.
It's true. And we don't have any of those Mac experts you don't want to hear from.
That's good point. Good point. And there are a lot of them out there.
Didn't want to go there.
Yeah. No names. No names.
Started the joke, but didn't want to finish it.
Oh, Adam, I wanted to start with one particular topic today, and then we'll roll into another, because in my mind, at least, they're sort of joined. I wanted to ask you if you will share whatever you want to share with us. We certainly don't have to have numbers. But how the TidBITS subscription thing is going.
It's going well.
Or was it really a subscription in the sense that I'm buying something, or is it more a support thing?
No, it's really not a subscription in that regards. I mean, we call it a TidBITS membership, and we are fairly clear about how, at whatever level people join, because there's different amounts you can give us, you'll get basically the same things. That we're not trying to say, oh wow, it's not like Kickstarter where if you give us $10 you'll get this, and if you give us $20 you'll get this other thing and all that. So the goal is very much that people are supporting TidBITS, and the only difference between any of the levels is that our is the color, little apple color that you get when you make comments. Everyone gets a colored apple that goes next to their name when they make comments on the site, and so you get a different color apple when you depending on your level. And the one other thing is we have a number of people who have been, we call them our TidBITS angels, the angel level, who've actually given us $1,000 for a lifetime membership, and those people we invite to dinner at Macworld. So we actually had several of them to dinner at Macworld this year, which was kind of fun. So that was great. But everyone else is really getting the same thing, and that's intentional because we don't want this to be about what you're getting. We want this to be about people supporting TidBITS really for everyone. That they see TidBITS as something that should be out there, not just for them, but for anyone who needs it. And so we're not trying to do kind of the exclusive paywall thing or the subscription thing or anything like that. It's more just really trying to say, hey, we need some support if we're going to be able to keep doing the kind of content you've become accustomed to over the last 23 years.
I'm glad to hear that you feel like it's working. For a lot of reasons, and we'll talk about one of them in a minute. But,
yes, because otherwise I'd be out on the street.
Well, yeah, there is that. I mean, and then how would we do Mac Notables?
We'll tweet for hire.
We'll tweet for money.
Yeah, good luck on that one.
Yeah, really. The subscription thing, putting it behind a paywall, there's some folks that do it, and it feels like it makes sense in their case. To me, it always, though, how do you decide what... If everything is behind a paywall and the sort of the exception is I put something out for free occasionally, that's one thing. But to split your content in, I don't know, 25-75 or 50-50 or whatever, how do you decide what goes behind the paywall, what you put out in front? That's a real challenge.
I think it is tricky, and some publications have dealt with it by saying, oh, it'll be available only on the site for a little while, and then it'll go behind the paywall, or maybe it'll be behind the paywall at first, and it'll come out after it's no longer timely, and it just gets too confusing, and I think you really have to decide, why are you publishing? And so this actually just came up for us. We started a new column with Joe Kissel, called Flipped Bits. We're actually quite pleased with our name. It's all about misconceptions. If you have a flipped bit, you're 180 degrees the way you should be. So people who think things, they have dearly held beliefs that are, not illogical, but they're really wrong. And so the whole point of the column is to address a lot of these misconceptions and try to figure out, try to explain, what the incorrect belief is and what's correct. And so Joe did an introductory introductory one, and then he did the first one on what happens when you boot from a duplicate. That, okay, what about your backups? What about Dropbox? What about email? What happens when you boot from this duplicate and then stuff happens on the duplicate? are you getting yourself into trouble? And people get very worried about that, because they boot from the duplicate and then Time Machine tries to kick in and Crash Plan's backing stuff up and their emails coming in and they kind of freak. Oh my God, stop it all. I don't want to mess up the duplicate because it's not my original. And then there's a difference between whether you're doing it quickly or, it's just a quick test to see if something's working, or if, your hard drive has died and you're actually working on the duplicate. Well, how do you behave differently then when you're going to be working on the duplicate for a while? So in any event, so that's what the column really focuses on, and it's great stuff. It's total classic Joe. It's really high quality, well-written information. And so we thought, this is the kind of thing we'd like to give to our members and sort of say, you look here, thank you, this is great. You were so happy that you were able to, to support us and make it possible for us to be able to afford to get Joe to write this kind of content. And so we initially thought, we'll make it member only. And then we thought, well, that's terrible. This is great content. The whole point of this is to help people, whether or not they've given us any money. Couple 2,000 people roughly, have joined TidBITS. And that's nice, but it's only 2,000. We have, that's not even 10% of people who read TidBITS in email, much less people who read on the web and RSS and the app and everything else. So it's just not enough people. And we publish because we want to help people. That's our goal. And so then came the idea, well, maybe we'll make it for members only for a week, and then it'll become available for anyone. And we thought, well, that's kind of weird too, because let's say you're reading this great article, you're a TidBITS member, and you want to tell people about it. Well, that means they can't get it then, so they're going to get some little message saying, so sorry, you can't read this for another 4 days. Are they really going to remember to come back? No. Are they really going to join because their friend sent them a link? Probably not. That they might eventually join because their friend sent them a link and it was a great link and they did it a couple of times, but they're not going on the first time. So we thought, this is crazy. We're overthinking this. And basically, we really want this information to be available to everyone right away. But if it's really that good, if it's unique stuff, not like the article I just wrote about macOS 10 10.8.3, no offense to my writing, but it's not that interesting. It's the same article that Macworld's going to do and Ars Technica's going to do and everyone else is going to do, because there's nothing you can say that's unique. So that article, boring. But Joe's FlipBits article, totally unique, great content. And so what we're saying with that one is we've fiddled our content management system so that if you're a member and you log in, it basically just says, hey, this, thank you for making this article possible. This is a special article, and we're really happy that we're able to do it with your support. And if you're not a member, it says, this is a really great article, and contributions from members made this one possible. Would you consider joining so that we can do more of this? So we'll see how it works. I mean, it's one of those things. It's never really 100% trackable. You never know why someone chooses to join or how they do it or anything like that. But, the goal is just to make sure that people understand that this is one of the main ways that TidBITS is funded. That we get income in other ways too, but the memberships really have made the difference for a lot of the kinds of content we want to make.
I think it's important that people understand it. Your comment about why people subscribe to TidBITS. I think people subscribe to TidBITS because of you and Tanya and Joe and Michael, and I'm going to leave a lot of people out, so I better stop. But Matt, the content that comes out of TidBITS is so high quality, but there's also that unique flair that you have to make it personal, that there is a TidBITS personality almost, and
it's true. And the only problem with that is that it takes a while for people to get to know us. And so in this day and age of the internet, and we'll talk more about this, where there is an infinite amount of information, even if someone comes to TidBITS and reads an article, even if it's a great article and they really like it, they're not going to get to know us from that. So that's why we really need to be in a situation where we are producing stuff that people, can hopefully come back to time and time again. And, because most people are only going to read one article and then go away. So everything we can do to say, hey, stick around, there's more of this great stuff here, and hopefully get them to join the email list, subscribe via RSS, get the iOS app, whatever it is, because that's, I think, the difference is that we consider ourselves as making a publication. It's a little bit like the old days when bands released albums. Remember those? Rather than singles. which you can sell a single on iTunes really easily, but didn't used to be able to really sell singles, and so it made much more sense to package it all together into an album. And Tanya and I were listening to a CD the other day. We're somewhere where there's only a CD player, so we're actually listening to a CD and going, this whole CD concept's pretty neat, because all the songs like kind of go together and everything. It's like Genius, only better.
So everything that's old is new again?
Well, precisely. And so, again, TidBITS it's a whole ball of wax. We write articles, that go together. We write articles that refer to other articles that we've written. You can come and read one article, sure, no problem. But what we're hoping to do is say, hey, we've got this huge amount of content here that's all linked and intertwingled and self-referential, and you can get a lot more out of it if you stick around and kind of get a lay of the land.
Well, I want to encourage everyone to go and join TidBITS, become a member, throw in the pot what you can, what you feel like you get out of it. That's if it's 1,000, great. If it's, I don't know what your minimum is, 10,
20 in this case,
okay.
But yeah,
if it's 20, do it.
Anything is much appreciated, and we've gotten a huge number of nice notes from people saying, wow, I've gotten so much value over this over 23 years too. I mean, keep in mind we've been doing this for a long time, but all I can afford is $20. I was like, look, that's totally fine. It's in many ways the thought that counts. If you've only got $20 and you want to do it, and even we've gotten people who say, look, I'd love to do this, but I'm just lost my job or whatever. I just don't have the money, and I'm never going to be. That's exactly why it's a voluntary membership and not a paywall. Because I'd feel terrible about locking that person out if they need help and and they don't have the money to even join TidBITS. Then gee, that makes it all the worse for them if that's the assistance they need to get something done on their Mac.
So where we're going with this, and I'm going to start, and then I'm going to let you take it in another direction because I think I know where you're going to take it. But I really feel strongly, and I've said it a million times on the shows about the issue of paying for things. Free is wonderful. I like free. You like free. We all like free. Free is a great way to kind of test things out. But at some point, if I'm going to be relying on something, and I kind of rely on TidBITS for a lot of quality information and not just the announcements of 10.0.3 or 10.8.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, right.
I want those offbeat articles by Joe that really are useful or interesting or both. So I have no problem paying for that and supporting it. Now, as we're recording this, Google has announced that they are discontinuing Reader. And this, in my mind, is one of those examples of I haven't been paying for Reader. I would have probably if I could have, but they didn't ask for it. And I've come to depend on Reader as a way to sync all my RSS feeds on all of my devices.
Yep.
And now they're saying it's going away. They're not even asking me to pay for it. They're just killing it.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of upset over this, like a lot of people, for purely personal reasons, because this is the way I've come to manage things. In fact, it was one of the ways that I advocated in my Macworld session in January that, use Reader to consolidate all your feeds.
Yeah.
So that's where I am, and I can, would have, and will pay for it if it's any kind of reasonable because I find it useful. You're looking at it maybe a little bit differently, though.
Well, I found the whole thing fascinating, and I definitely fall into the category of not really having a horse in the race because I don't use RSS. Yeah, I have a Google Reader account. Yes, I've used it with NetNewsWire to sync, I don't know, I've got a couple of dozen subscriptions. But you know what? I look at both NetNewsWire and Google Reader independently a couple of times a year. Mostly when something's gone wrong with one of the TidBITS RSS feeds and I need to verify what, someone's telling me. Fact is, I've never found RSS useful. That I always found it just too overwhelming. That all the things that I needed to know about and pay attention to, there were so many of them, I couldn't keep up if I actually let myself be exposed to all of them. So again, I don't really have a horse in the race in that regard. But what, and this is what I wrote about on TidBITS just today. I think this just raises all sorts of really interesting issues. One of them, is this concept of free versus paid. Or more generally for Google, because Google doesn't want your money. Really, they don't in this particular case. That's not their business model. Their business model, plain and simple, is ads on search. And that's where they make all their money. And so everything else Google does, and they've been doing a huge amount of consolidation over the last year and a half, trying to say, hey, we let these 20% projects that was also cool. Our engineers would get 20% of their time to do neat stuff. Well, they got kind of out of hand. And so now we have a bazillion projects that don't really make sense for the business. And they're taking time and energy, or we're not even maintaining them, so it's embarrassing. Again, it's worth keeping that in mind, that sometimes you do something cool, but if the developer goes on to do something else or whatever, you've got this code which just ages and gets ugly and bad and reflects badly on your company, and you just want it to go away. You actually don't want money to make it better. You just want it to disappear. And so I think there's a whole bunch of situations or reasons why Google might have wanted this. But one of the big things that this raises is that Google Reader, the way you were suggesting using it, and the way a lot of people used it, was a tool. It was something that you could build upon, either you as an individual or a developer. Brent Simmons, who wrote NetNewsWire, he had his own system at first, and then he worked with the Gator something. Newsgator?
Newsgator.
Newsgator.
Yeah, Newsgator.
And then I forget what happened, what the exact chronology was, but, you having Newsgator syncing didn't make sense. And so he changed NetNewsWire so it worked with Google Reader. Pretty much everyone else who did feed syncing did the same thing because Google Reader was good and it was free and it was Google, so it was big. It wasn't like some fly-by-night company that was probably going to go out of business in a month. So it made a lot of sense for people to rely on that. Unfortunately, what made sense for all the developers didn't make sense for Google. That it just doesn't solve any of their problems. And so, again, from their perspective, totally reasonable business decision. From the community's perspective, horrible. I relied on that. And so what Google's saying is that, we're not a tools company. We've been seen that way. Google Maps was a tool that a lot of people could use, and it still is, but you have to pay for it now in a lot of ways because they realized they'd built something that was tremendously valuable, and it was just being used to make everyone else money and costing them money. So that one, it is actually chargeable at a fairly high level if you want to integrate it into your app. But with Google Reader, there's not any money there. RSS is on the way down. People just aren't using it as much, and Google was seeing all the usage decline. So, so they said, hey, we're not a tool company. Really, we're a platform company. And the platform is, and a lot of the pundits have been saying this, we don't get our news from RSS. We get it from Twitter and Facebook and Google+. And that's where Google's platform is. And I think that's troubling in a lot of ways. I mean, platforms are good in many ways, but they also can be problems.
Yeah, I understand the business model thing, and you make an excellent point from Google's perspective about how they view Reader. And let's face it, the Reader website or web access to it was not the reason that I used it. I used it as a tool, as an aggregator, because there were a lot of people putting a lot prettier front ends on it. NetNewsWire comes to mind. On the iOS, Mr. Reader comes to mind. But I look at it, and we've seen this happen before where companies, not in Google's case, well, not for this example, where they acquire a tool with a following that people really like, or at least some percentage of people really like, and they kill it. And here, will they change this decision? Would they consider start charging for it? God, I would love to see them just license the code and the process to somebody and let them charge for it. There are a couple different ways this could go, but it makes me nervous again about starting to rely on free platforms. And now, thanks to you, now I've got another worry because I start to worry about, okay, the free services out there that I'm becoming dependent upon, are they the main part or a significant part of that company's business?
Yes.
So now I'm really worried. Thanks, Adam.
Well, there's an old saying in journalism, you follow the money. And you have to decide whether or not, where the money is going is aligned with your interests. I mean, honestly, this is a little bit my problem with Facebook. That the only way Facebook can make money is not aligned with my interests. That they can sell ads, based on knowing vast amounts of information about me at a point when I'm not interested in the ads. That I'm actually much less bothered by Google's ads, because if I'm searching for a new electric razor, then Google's going to show me an ad for that. Okay, that's not a bad thing. And if they know more about me to make that ad more reasonable, or a higher quality link, then that's good too. But Facebook, that just feels, it just feels like they're only trying to market to who they think I am, sort of at all times. And it's kind of the billboard of your life. And I don't know, that troubles me. Similarly, Amazon's actually another good example. Knowing stuff about you, they just want to make it so you can buy more stuff that you want. And they're not. If they do their job right, they're going to be predicting stuff that you really do want, as opposed to truly random things, which is sort of what shows up in the rest of stores.
I think I just got a text from Mark Zuckerberg saying that he wants to use Facebook, the billboard of your life, as their next tagline.
No, I didn't say that.
Adam Engst, right? Credit given.
Now I'll have to think about that.
Adam will be begging me for an edit later, and I won't give it to him.
But no, I mean, it's really true, and I think this is one of the things that we all run into. I mean, because I do this. We're setting up a survey for something we're doing. There's a bazillion survey tools out there, and that's a technical number. There really are a bazillion of them, and so you look at 3 or 4 of them, and honestly, you can't decide. So what do? You go with the one that's free. Now, if I was doing a lot of surveys, if I was doing surveys regularly, and I had significant, if they were really important to my business, yeah, I definitely want to pay for one, or at least be truly, truly certain that the survey company was going to be around in X years. And so it's hard to avoid the lure of free. iOS apps, same thing. If there's 5 apps out there that show up in a search that all claim to do the same thing, you're going to try the free one first, aren't you?
Of course.
Most everyone is.
Yeah.
But when it's not aligned with your interests, when the free is really aligned with someone, with the other company's interests in a bad way, that's when you really have to say, nah, I don't like this. I don't think anyone thought too much about Google, because Google's always been very clear about how their goal is to get people using the internet more. Because they believe the more people use the internet, the more they'll do searches, and the more they do searches, the more money Google will make. And it's not a direct connection, but it's been a pretty consistent one on Google's part all along.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I guess you could say that for all of us. If TidBITS produces more content, hopefully more people will read it, and maybe you'll get more subscribers. Yeah. So I don't see that as a bad thing. I guess, maybe I'm just being a little selfish here, that something that I've come to rely on is at least it appears to be, being taken away. I'm sure somebody will step into the breach and fill the gap somehow. It may cost me, and that will be fine. My credit card is waiting. Produce it for me, please.
But here's the thing, and this is what I think is behind a lot of the outcry, and it's something which I think we don't think about right, frankly. That I remember at some point, Jason Snell tweeted something about how how things are always changing, and I actually didn't get into this on Twitter with him because it wasn't a good time. I didn't feel like having the conversation, but I was like, no, things don't change. Things actually stay the same. I have the same wife 20 years later. I have the same child 14 years later. I've owned 3 cars since 1991. I've lived in, 1, 2, 3 houses as an adult. most of the things in my life change very infrequently. The way I use my Mac, yeah, it evolves over time, but you know what? I'm pretty happy with all the techniques I've worked up over the years. I'm very email heavy. I'm very keyboard centric. All of these things there's no right or wrong. But when Apple comes out with Launchpad, I'm like, whatever, I'm not going to adopt a new launching mechanism because I've been using LaunchBar for years. I like LaunchBar. And so I think there's this belief that that change is constant and inevitable and good and all of that. But I don't think people realize just how stressful it is for a large portion of the population. And the one that, Google Reader is obviously kicking a lot of this off now because, what if you have to change your newsreader? What if you have to get a new one both on your Mac and your iPhone and your iPad and it's throwing everything up in the air and you're not happy about that? That's stressful. Or the other big one that just happened not that long ago is iTunes 11. Functionality of iTunes 11 barely changed. Most of the features really are still there. But, oh man, listening to people complain about it. And they're not wrong. They're just saying, hey, I've gotten really used to this. I've learned how to do this. I know how to get around in this program. And I don't appreciate having that taken away from me. That's part of my life, part of the way I set my world up. And, my father was actively angry at Apple about iTunes 11. He didn't realize it was going to be that different when he let it update. Once it's updated, good luck. You're not going back. It's not inconceivable, but it's really, really hard in terms of basically restoring your entire Mac. And so, that's the kind of thing that I think we just don't quite internalize how troubling a lot of this change can be for a lot of people. And yeah, I'll admit that it's more troubling the older you get, because the older you get, the more I won't say become badly set in your ways, but the more you've figured stuff out for you. And you're not really interested in trying it. Just like, you don't really want a new wife and a new kid tomorrow. You're kind of used to the old ones and you like them. And you don't need to get everything new all the time. And yet, this is running headlong into the need by these massive, massive companies to compete as much as possible on rate of change as much as anything else. Apple's got to come out with iOS 7 soon. Android has to rev soon because otherwise they won't be able to compete with iOS. Facebook has to constantly be doing some new thing so that they can, convince people they should use Facebook more than Twitter and more than Googleapos. And it's this we're caught up in this endless and ever speeding up gerbil wheel. And I think that people are getting kicked out the side in kind of a bad way.
This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Transporter, the solution to your cloud storage needs. Transporter provides you with a private cloud that you control, but that can be shared with anyone and accessed on any of your iDevices. One of the great things about Transporter is the cost. You know what you're going to pay when you buy, and know that you will have no monthly fees at any time. Share as much data as you like with as many people as you like at a known fixed cost. Your files are online and in the cloud quickly and easily. Just copy what you want to share, photos, documents, whatever, to your transporter, and they are immediately available to your iDevices or to anyone you choose to share them with. Get 10% off your transporter by visiting filetransporter.com/MV and use the code MacVoices. The transporter is available from all your favorite retailers, but you only get the 10% off if you buy from the website. Thanks to Transporter for sponsoring this edition of MacVoices. Wow. I'm thinking about what you're saying and relating to a business perspective and thinking, okay, my favorite example for this, and I've never used this on the show, is Heinz ketchup. Right? Heinz ketchup has not changed.
Not at all. How many, was it 57 varieties?
Yep. But they've tried things to expand their market. now happily they haven't messed with your basic Heinz ketchup, but there's some that comes with onion chunks, and there's some other that comes mixed, I think, with mustard, or at least it did at one point. Then there's another version that comes with hot sauce included in the recipe.
There's a swirly one with grape jelly, right?
Yeah, really? Oh,
no, that's peanut butter. Sorry,
that's peanut butter. Ketchup, Adam, ketchup. So I respect it, but at some point you look at it and say, okay, this is your point in the market. You're making a good living. Maybe there are other ways to expand occasionally. Just don't mess with the base thing. And we've seen Facebook mess with theirs. We've seen Twitter mess with theirs. Apple has messed with theirs in a kind of interesting way. They're cannibalizing themselves to some degree with the iPad taking Mac sales. And they're okay with that, and I think it's a wise move, because otherwise they're going to be left behind. And I just did it. They're going to be left behind.
But see, this is just the problem. Who are they left behind for? I'm not a marketing expert. I'm totally talking off the top of my head here, but I think there's basically there's this curve. You got the early adopters over here, and there's not very many of them. And yeah, the early adopters, anything new is great because they are excited by it. They want to be throwing their entire work processes up in the air all the time. But what they don't, but they aren't really the majority of the population. So when you get into the majority of the population, people are in that big bunch of the curve. That's where really the money is. But those people don't do things nearly as often. They're not going to buy a new iPhone, every time a new one comes out. They're frankly not even going to buy a new phone until their old one breaks, because they don't really see the need. I mean, I still know lots of people who are using old phones because they haven't had an excuse. I mean, and if their phone literally broke, they'd probably buy an iPhone or an Android phone, but they certainly wouldn't. They're not going to go to the effort of changing things just for the sake of changing them. And then I think as you start tailing down that big curve, you end up with people who are never going to buy anything. That they really just aren't going to do it at all because it's just too hard, too much, too confusing. And so, but the companies seem to feel like they need to focus on those early adopters at all times, because that's how one competes somehow. That even though the mainstream people probably don't want it changing all that much, they're not really the target audience in some ways.
We just did a Mac jury on software licensing and the way that Adobe and Microsoft seem to be trending, that they're turning some of these things, or trying to turn them into software as a service. And I can't help but think we were talking about it as, well, this is a way for everybody to kind of keep up to date and get the latest new thing, falling into that trap that you're talking about. I'm wondering if this would be an incentive for people to slow down a little bit, that my Microsoft Word or my Adobe Photoshop, that's a way to create a revenue stream for the company and maybe not force me to change? I mean, could you flip it on its head and go that direction?
Well, it's not inconceivable. However, the problem is, I think the same thing, Microsoft and Adobe are doing is they're in essence bringing their licensing into the cloud, even if their software isn't. So it's just like if you pay for, Basecamp or, some web service where you're paying for the service and it's changing all the time underneath you. And you don't really get any choice in that because they're building a system, and that system is just always being pushed out to you. And that's fine as long as the system itself is what you want and you don't really mind. Hopefully small changes or larger changes are more welcome. When you get to these mature programs like Photoshop or Excel or whatnot, you don't usually need many new things. That most people can do all the things they want. And so conceivably, Adobe and Microsoft could say, well, we're actually going to slow down the number of, the amount of changes we do, because if you're going to give us money regularly, we don't need to attract you over and over and over again to every upgrade. Because when you have an upgrade, you have a 1.0 and you come out with a 2.0 and you want people to buy the 2.0, you got to give them a good reason to do that. And, it's, increasingly, in some ways, look at Mac OS X. Apple's made it really cheap the last couple of times, which makes it easier. But, there's a lot of people still on Snow Leopard because they just didn't see the win in Lion. And maybe Mountain Lion's getting harder to resist because software is being, making it more necessary, that you're starting to stuff that won't be compatible. But it's tricky. How do you, can you even not move forward? Are software companies like sharks? Do they have to keep going forward because it's just too boring to sit still? And you can't get good engineers to just come and fix bugs. And if you lose the good engineers, then you can't do anything interesting ever again. So, it really may be, I hadn't considered this before, it really may be that software companies are sharks. And they have to keep moving at all times or they die, which is unfortunately at odds with a very large number of people out there who don't want new stuff all the time. They are uninterested in new stuff. They don't want to get into their car and find out that the radio button is now on the left side versus the right side. Oh, we thought it would be better over there. Well, don't move the freaking radio button. It's my car. Leave it alone. That's what we're seeing with software. They're not just moving the radio button around. They're giving you, now we have the heads-up display that you can drive your car with your hands, in your lap. You don't have to actually put them on the steering wheel anymore. Isn't this a great idea? Well, it might have been a great idea, but at least give me the choice of whether or not I get it. So many of these things we don't even get a choice.
I never thought we'd be having a discussion about resisting change on this show, but you make some great points.
Stand up for the status quo.
Well, I have this vision of a guy in a dark suit and white tie, leaning over my shoulder saying, "That's a pretty nice version of my software you got there, buddy. Be a shame if something happened to it." But from a business standpoint, I don't know that they're sharks. They're just businesses, and businesses have to generate revenue. And if you can't come up with genuine, honest-to-God innovations, then I guess maybe you do the cosmetic tweaks. You do things that, you change the file format a little bit so the new version isn't compatible with the old one. I'm not mentioning any names. You may have to resort to some of those tricks. And now all of a sudden I find myself almost thinking that software as a service might be desirable if it gave me the option maybe to not have to do all the upgrades if I didn't need the features, but do it at a reasonable price.
Well, it's a fascinating concept. You say, it's business and businesses have to keep doing things. Well, it depends on your type of business. Heinz just produces ketchup, but ketchup's consumable.
You took it right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Precisely.
So to speak.
And so, sometimes you just get down there late at night with that bottle of ketchup and you're like, I gotta have it. Well, maybe not. But I think that, our phones and our cameras and our computers, they're consumable too, but just not on the same time cycle. We really are going to get a new phone. It might be 2 years or 3 years or whatever before it dies in some way, but it's going to happen at some point. Ketchup's pretty cheap, and I go through a couple of bottles of ketchup a year. But I buy a new iPhone every year or every 2 years, and I'll bet Apple's making more money from me than Heinz is.
Yeah, but there's a difference here that we're overlooking, and that is that ketchup and cameras and iPhones and cars are physical objects, and software is not. Well,
yes, and I think you're absolutely right. Software is a service, and that's why Apple's always a little confusing in this regard, because for the most part, Apple software is their loss leader. Even when they do charge for it, they're not really charging for the software. They're really locking you into the iOS or macOS X platform. Anything you buy or learn is saying, hey, you don't want to switch to anything else because this is good and you know how to do it. and that's fine. It's totally legitimate, but it does skew the distribution of like what things cost. I mean, iOS apps, they cost 99 cents. Everyone knows that if they're not free, and then that's a whole big change from back in the day when your productivity apps were $100 or $200, and the really big ones were $500 or $1,000 sometimes. And so that has really changed. And I'll admit I subscribe to the Adobe Creative Cloud because I need InDesign occasionally. I need Photoshop occasionally. I can't justify hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for using them once a month. But it turns out I can justify $29.99. That it's worth it to my business to make sure that I have access to all of Adobe's stuff, occasionally. And yes, I do want the bug fixes. Do I want the new big updates? Well, I don't know. I mean, I actually haven't used Acrobat 11 yet because one of the plugins I rely on in Acrobat 9, I'd have to spend a lot of money to upgrade, and it does what I want in Acrobat 9. So. No, I haven't used Acrobat 11 because I don't want to go backwards in functionality, without having to pay a lot more money. So yeah, I think it's conceivable that that you could just say, hey, give me X amount of dollars per month, year, whatever, and I will make sure your software keeps working the way you expect it to. And maybe, just maybe, there's a way. Here's an interesting thought. Maybe there's a way that you could. And again, particularly as software as a service, where you could say, we've locked this code. If you want to switch to version 2.0, you can, but you can't really go back because too much has changed. But we're going to keep running version 1.0. And, I'm thinking of something like, I don't know, Trello. It's a web-based, information management and task management web service that we really, really like. And it's still free, but it's Fog Creek software, so I'm pretty certain they're going to be around. But it's a situation where I could see someone getting really, really interested in how it works at a certain point in time and being very uninterested in some major change they might make. And so maybe there's something to be said for saying to people, okay, or saying to software companies, okay, can you imagine how you might not change things for people who don't wish to have things changed?
Here's another one for you, not along the same lines, but one of the reasons that I think I'm not happy about the way Adobe and Microsoft are going is the pricing and the long term. And especially I'm looking at Adobe because I need, you said occasionally, and that's a great phrase. I need Photoshop occasionally. I need Illustrator occasionally. I definitely can't justify buying the Creative Suite at the price. I'm struggling to justify the monthly payment just because I might need it occasionally. I'd love to be able to purchase a day license.
Yeah.
$5 for a day. That may be crazy, but I don't think so.
The problem with all of these kinds of things, though, is that I agree that the pricing is a real issue because I'm paying $30 a month for Creative Suite right now, and I think that's because I had an old version of InDesign, so I was able to get it up kind of a 1 year reduced rate. So $360 a year, that's worth it. It's still a fair amount of money, but it feels like that's worth it. Once it goes up to I think it's $50 a month normally for Creative Suite. Is that right? And,
I think so, $49.95.
Yeah, something like that. So at that point, you're at, what is it, $600 a month or $600 a year. That starts to feel like, geez, I'm paying $600 for an app that I've launched 10 times. So, I think there's a real disconnect between with what users feel is a reasonable amount for how much they're really using it and how much a subscription pays. So there's a difference between a usage fee and a subscription fee. And I suspect that's one of those sort of awkward ones where people love subscription fees. The people who use InDesign every day, all day, if you get it for $600 a year, that's great, because I use all this Adobe stuff. I'm, making out like a bandit. But if you're like us and, and launch it once a month, you kind of feel like you're getting taken. So, it's a tricky situation because, we'd like to have the, look, I'll pay you $5 every time for a day every time I use it, because then I would pay you, $60 or, $80 for a year. But Adobe would prefer not to let me pay them $80 a year in comparison with, $300 or $600 a year.
But I think it could open up a new revenue stream. At $600 a year, I know the choice I'm going to make, because I don't do that much in the way of graphics work. I would prefer those tools, but I'm going to have to go and find some replacements. It just doesn't make sense. I can't throw $600 away. And your analogy is perfect on something I launch 10 times a year.
Well, in fact, maybe we're saying, oh, this doesn't make sense, but maybe it's just like everything else where, people wouldn't even consider Photoshop or InDesign because they have so little use for it. But if it were one of those things where, they got a document and they wanted, they could launch it and it would say, it's going to cost you, $5 for the day. Okay with that? Well, yes, I am. And we have the payment mechanisms to do that kind of, small, quick payment and quick authorization right now. So, maybe there's a whole lot more people who won't buy it, won't subscribe to it, but really would pay for it on a literal per usage basis. And Adobe's win there would be the people who pay for it on a per usage basis, but use it more than 6 times a month or whatever it works out to the subscription. I didn't subscribe because I thought I wasn't going to use it next month, but it turns out I really use it 10 times every month. Now I'm paying way more than I would have had I just subscribed. So economists love to do all this kind of geeky pricing, dynamic pricing, and pricing models and all that. But I really wonder if Adobe has ever looked at the per use model.
And contrast everything we just said about Adobe and the way they look at it, and then let's go back to the beginning of the conversation and the way you look at creating your information and why you publish. And that was a fascinating comment, that you want to get the information out there. Now, I'm not convinced, and no disrespect intended to Adobe, but they're a corporation. You're not. So they may not.
I am too. I am an S corporation. S stands for small.
Okay. They may not be interested in helping the world be a better designed place. Okay? They may just be looking at the bottom line, and there's nothing wrong with that in my world. So I'm looking at it and saying, economically, there are people that can't afford your product but would like to use it on a limited basis. Yes, there's no question you have an extremely sophisticated product. I'm going to have to pay significant amount of money just to have it open long enough to learn to use it. Yeah. So maybe I will subscribe for 3 or 6 months while I learn to use it, and then give you $5 a day every time I need to use it.
Well, and I think there's a lot of businesses that don't think like this but could. Apple actually goes back and forth, I think. So, for instance, when the iPhone first shipped, unlimited data. That's thinking like a customer. Customers loved that unlimited data program. And, we never really found out what happened in terms of, did most people actually really use that much data? And obviously some people totally abused it. And, and AT&T spent a long time trying to get them to stop and, cap them and, delay them and all this kind of stuff. But the fact is that unlimited plan lasted for a very short time. And, the other one that bugs the heck out of me, I don't want a cell calling plan at all. I want per usage because, you know what? I make almost no calls on my phone. I don't want to make calls on my phone. I've never wanted to make calls on my phone, and I would prefer if people didn't call me either. That I use the iPhone for data, really. And I preferably want it even on a Wi-Fi network, so it's faster than the outside networks, the cell networks. But Apple has either not been able to or has changed their thinking such that they're going with, carrier-friendly systems. Even with the iPad, the first Verizon model it was the first Verizon model. I forget. There was something with Verizon that was, again, a really nice kind of unlimited flat rate plan that lasted like 6 months, and then it went away again. And so, Apple has either, been unwilling or unable to make those kinds of things stick, which is too bad. I really think that, again, if, lots of people I know would have an iPhone if they didn't feel like they were going to be paying, $100 a month, when all was said and done.
And I have a theory about that. First of all, I want to correct you. I don't think you can abuse an unlimited plan. If somebody sells me an unlimited plan and it's unlimited, how do you abuse it? So,
Yes.
I don't think that was abuse. What bugs me, I totally understand and agree with AT&T and Verizon. If I have an iPhone sitting here and I'm streaming Netflix, 12, 14, 18 hours a day, all right, that's an abuse of the way it was intended. All right, so don't punish the whole world.
Right.
Give that person a $100 plan a month, a $100 data plan, a $200 data plan, if that's what they want to do. But don't come back and say, okay, Chuck, you can only have 3 gigs or 3 megs or, some ridiculously small amount because Adam was streaming,
Hey,
Star Wars.
I have the 200 meg plan and proud of it.
Yeah. Because Adam was streaming Star Wars, this whole Star Wars trilogy, for 6
Tethering
weeks.
it to my laptop.
Yeah,
via HD.
Right. And boy, get me started there. That's another thing. Just stop jerking me around with all these nitpicking little costs. Sell me data, let me use it how I want, and then sell me more. Don't charge me extra for tethering or force me to change plans because I want to tether. Just as far as I can tell, bits are bits, no matter which machine they go to.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and it's very frustrating. And I think, the cell carrier network world is just an evil, ugly, pit of sin. There's no question about that. But
how do you really feel, Adam?
But I don't see anyone. I mean, actually, I won't say that. I won't say that I don't see anyone. Kirk McElhearn did an article for us a year or so ago about a company called Free in France, and they have a really rational, cheap plan that you can get for all your internet needs. And basically, what they're saying is, hey, we don't have to do things the old way. And when we have all these totally reasonable ways of just paying for what you want. If you use more, you pay more. Hey, imagine that.
Yeah. This has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like we went deep on a number of different subjects. At the end of the day, where does all this leave us? Are we still no, scratch that, not still, but are we at yet another turning point where maybe for the businesses to make sense, they go to more of subscription fees or something, and they implement some of these things? Or do you think we can continue with the buy my software model and every so often I'm going to hit you for an upgrade?
I think one of the important things to remember is that every business model will be tried. And that makes for confusion beyond belief. So, just look at Apple and Google. Google gives Android away to cell carriers. Apple, keeps iOS to themselves and charges for their own stuff. That's a huge difference in business model. Even where Google makes all their money is on search, giving search away, basically. And Apple makes all their money selling hardware. And Microsoft makes all their money selling software. And, Twitter and Facebook attempt to make money putting ads on things, not necessarily always successfully. Amazon makes money by selling you other people's stuff. So all of these companies are really, they're butting heads, but they're not on the same playing field. So it's really hard to compare them in certain ways, or because they've all come to the same rough positions through different means and through different models. And I think that just makes life hard for consumers who have to decide how it is they wish to interact with these ecosystems. And so, for instance, for apps, a subscription makes a lot of sense, but sometimes, if you can't do a subscription, you better get an upgrade fee. But, Apple doesn't let you do upgrade fees in the Mac App Store or the App Store for iOS, so you better do a subscription, or maybe you could do in-app purchases. it gets very, very confusing. But it's really clear to me that it's important for businesses to figure out ongoing streams of revenue. And if one of them, such as the upgrade model, has been taken away by Apple, people really have to think of another one. They cannot just go with the old one and think in that way. They really have to think outside that business model box. And sometimes that's going to make for awkwardness because, oh, gee, upgrades are now free, but you have to subscribe. But the upgrades aren't optional. So when you upgrade, everything's going to change. So sorry. Yeah, I don't have any good answers here. I think that everyone's trying to make do with what they have and what they can. But I do think that potentially more attention is being paid to new customers and potential customers than existing customers, and that may be a problem at times.
I got to let you go, but throw one last business model into the mix that I wanted to touch on earlier, and I forgot about it until you said something. App.net. App.net
is fascinating. As sort of it's for those who haven't seen it, you can think of it like Twitter used to be, in the sense that you can do kind of the Twitter like microblogging and all that. And Twitter used to have an API that you could use to do a lot of different things. And what App.net has said is that we're actually all about the API. And we'll make money by developers paying us $100 a year to do whatever the heck they want on our platform, and by users paying us some amount per year to be on the platform. And we haven't seen truly interesting stuff show up on App.net yet, but I absolutely adore their concept of saying, hey, we're going to build you some plumbing. We're going to be an arms dealer. We're going to serve everyone equally. All you're going to do is pay us some money, and you'll get access to the whole kit and caboodle. So, that's a model that it's not exciting. It's like the companies that will come and clean your septic tank. We really need them to be around, but they're not exciting companies. And I think that App.net is going to be a very boring company in that regard, because all they're doing is providing that infrastructure. And it's up to other people to make cool uses of it. And that's what I really am waiting to see. Hey, who knows? Maybe someone can do an RSS synchronization service via App.net. And then all the RSS readers can use that instead of Google Reader. I don't know if that's feasible within their system, but that's the kind of thing we need them to do so that they can, in essence, market their capabilities to developers, and developers can build on them for us.
We have developers that listen to this show, so there's an idea, folks.
Yeah, really.
Maybe
App.net.
Yeah, and a platform to do it with. Because what do you get? 10 gigs now for a paid account of storage?
Yeah, something like that.
Something,
And I think, what's fascinating about App.net, and we haven't seen too much of before, is that they started off, we really got caught up in this, we need a ton of users and we'll figure out how to monetize it later. That's been like the internet business model for years and years and years now. And Twitter and Facebook were the sort of the ultimate examples. Even Dropbox, where we'll get lots of users and we'll figure something out. There's got to be a business model here somewhere. And once we have enough users, we'll know what it is. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. That I personally, I don't know exactly how the finances of Twitter and Facebook are doing, but they're making do really only on volume, because it's not like they can do anything particularly interesting there at all. It's just advertising. It's not even particularly relevant advertising in the sense that people aren't looking to be advertised to when they're chatting with their friends. But if you're a company like App.net and you come into the game saying, if you want to join up, you're going to have to pay us some money. And Kickstarter actually is a very interesting development for that, because it used to be you'd come in, you'd want to charge for your thing, but you'd have no way of reaching people. And so you'd have to be free to be easy to join. And so with Kickstarter, someone can say, here's what we're going to do. and if you give us this amount of money, we'll do it. We'll give you this back and everything. But it's really always the game ending goal has to be on the project that's being funded. That if we get enough money, you'll get this in return. And I find Kickstarter fascinating. I don't actually participate a huge amount, but it's still fun to watch. When the people behind the Veronica Mars TV show say, "Hey, if you give us $2 million, we'll do a movie," and they hit $2 million, in less than a day. Turns out lots of people would love to see a Veronica Mars movie, and even if Warner Brothers wasn't willing to pony up a couple $1 million for it, the world is. And so if the world can start seeing the utility of infrastructure-based services, maybe Kickstarter's a way for some of those to get off the ground as well.
It turns the world of investment on its head, because now, at least in theory, the folks with the cash and the infrastructure don't have to take the risk. They also don't get the reward. Yeah. So now maybe they'll take bigger risks. I don't know.
It's hard to say. I mean, the thing is there's always a tension, because it's potentially a lot easier to convince, a couple of rich people to give you money than it is to convince a whole lot of not rich people to give you money. But on the other hand, the rich people might be smarter about their money because it's, what they're investing in, because they're investing a lot more. So, you could say, yeah, sure, I want to, invest in this random smartwatch that's, it's being proposed, and, and it sounds great, but it turns out these people couldn't possibly create this thing to save their lives. Whereas a venture capitalist would have looked at their business plan, their backers, and their technology, and said, "You people are fools, go away." So obviously Kickstarter is a little easier to, I don't want to say game the system exactly, but the oversight is different, because no one's investing enough to care as much. If you only invested, $35, and they don't actually ship, not a big deal. Whereas if you were investing, $10 million, you care pretty deeply if they're going to ship.
Well, and if you're investing $10 million, you're looking for a return. And
That's right.
If I'm investing $10 or $15, I'm looking for the return as in the T-shirt they promised or whatever. But if I don't get it, it's not going to kill me. So
precisely.
And happily, it doesn't make sense in that scenario. It cuts the lawyers out, because now there's nobody to sue. So there's an advantage there. Adam, this has been a blast. Thank you so much. I don't know if we came to any serious conclusions, but we sure stimulated a lot of thought.
I don't think there's any solid conclusions here, but I will say that the article that I wrote about this whole, this Google Reader thing, that's prompted a whole bunch of thoughts. I mean, it was like, my head was exploding about this all day. I have a whole bunch more stuff, big topics that we could have talked about for another hour easy. So if people are interested, go to the TidBITS website and look for the thoughts prompted by Google Reader's demise article. And you can read on all the various other things, like, the war that's being waged against us by the infinite amount of information on the internet.
Well, maybe we can get back. In fact, we will get back maybe and tap some of those topics for other Mac Notables discussions, because there's a lot here. Right now, I know that wife that you've had for so long that you really like is looking for you, so we probably should let you go.
Getting close to dinner time here.
Yeah. Adam, thanks a lot.
Anytime, Chuck.
Folks, one message to take away from this, please pay for and support the things you use and that you like, and TidBITS is definitely one of those. Short advertisement here. We are doing, since the last time Adam was here, I think we're doing a MacVoices Dispatch newsletter. So you can find the link to subscribe. It just keeps you kind of informed about some of the changes we're making, gives you a little look behind the scenes. It's nothing terribly fancy. It's certainly not TidBITS, but it's a way for us to...
Email is way smarter than RSS, though. Not reliant on anyone else.
He had to make that point. So check that out. We'll have links in the show notes to the articles Adam mentioned and anything else we talked about. Until the next time, he's Adam Engst. I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Notables. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and for more Apple, Mac, and tech-related shows, including MacVoices, Mac Notables, the Mac Jury, and the MacVoices Briefing. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.